Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. And I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that the day is treating you nicely. It has been a fairly productive day. What's up, Lumpy? Was lurking quietly in your stream earlier today while reading. Watched you build a little bit of a castle and mostly talk to Kay about other video games, but hope that you're doing well. I finished a book today, which is always fun. You get that good, kind of feeling. And I had one sitting there waiting for me, as I usually do. So I started reading another one, which, kind of goes. Watched some TV. Worked on some decals for a model kit. What's up, Tuna? Tuna, do you get the standard summer, not summer, Christmas 2 weeks off break that other schools get, or are you still having to report to work even if there are no students? The school is closed, but you have to show up. Ugh, that does suck. Hello, Kaylee. What? Do you want to get on puppy cam? You want to see the puppy? Hey. What are you doing? You want to look right here? What are we doing? You just want to sit? What's up? What's up? The popper. You gonna get a shake? Oh, that's a good shake. Well, thank you. That's a good shake. She's been especially needy today. I don't know what's going on in the puppy world, but she's wanted a lot of attention today. So I've actually had to attend the puppy a little bit. What's up, Green Herring? Ooh, okay. I don't even know what I was saying. I just got interrupted by puppy. And, when the puppy shows up, everybody wants to see the puppy because the puppy's more entertaining than I am. And I'm okay with that, right? Like, I get that this is not really bringing all the boys to the yard. I get it. But anyway, yeah, it's just been sort of a day. Started watching Reservation Dogs TV show that a lot of people had been telling me that I should watch. It's okay. I don't know if it's as good as everybody says that it is, but it's not bad. It's entertaining enough that I'm into the second season, so obviously it's not horrible. What else? Brittany and I have been watching Blue-Eyed Samurai, which is pretty good. The first episode was spectacular. We're 3 episodes out of 8 in so far. The second and third episode have kind of leveled out. Obviously, the first one was like, we want to hook you. It did a really good job of it too. So we're probably going to finish watching that up. But we're watching that together, so it's like whenever we both have time. Brittany's been very busy in the garden lately, so she's been doing all that stuff, which is fine. It's not like we have to sit and watch TV all day long, right? But yeah, we're on Adventures in History. This is the last history stream before Christmas. There's a chance, as always, that I might get on this weekend. Probably won't be Sunday though. Sunday is Christmas Eve, and I know for a fact that I'll be out of town. So maybe Saturday, maybe tomorrow. I do have to go do a lot of work at my parents' house tomorrow, so I don't know how I'm going to feel after I get done with that. Hello, Caps Locks. Seen a couple of cool Blue Eye cosplays. It doesn't necessarily seem like it would be too terribly hard to do that. But I don't know. I've never really done cosplay, so... I did find out that one of the pop-up events for the Gundam base that I thought I was going to be able to get to in New Orleans is actually inside of Fan Expo New Orleans. So I thought that the shop was going to just pop up in the convention center and you were going to be able to go browse it, but it's actually inside of a convention. So to even get to the booth, you have to pay entry fee for the convention. And I'm not necessarily super excited about spending $40 just to get into the door for the opportunity to browse a pop-up store that might not even have kits that I'm interested in. So probably not going to go to that. And that was kind of a bummer because I was really excited about that getting close enough. So Gundam Base is a really, really big Japanese model kit maker that has a lot of exclusive stuff that they make with Bandai, sort of for their store particularly. And this is stuff that's usually really, really, really hard to find. And they have done now a couple of years in running this pop-up store where they send a whole bunch of stuff over here in a display and kind of like stuff, and they popped up at a couple of places across the United States, and one of them was going to be in New Orleans, which was close enough for me to drive to. And I got really excited about going until today I found out that it was inside of this convention. So that kind of like that whole thing. You mean Barat? I don't know, do I? What's up, DCI Banks? How's it going? I don't actually know if I mean Barat or not. I probably don't mean Barat, but I could. Good. All right. Let's kind of go for it. So we're doing the Adventures in History thing, which means that we're going through history in chronological order. The last time that we were chatting historically, we were talking about the Chinese Renaissance, which is going on over here in the 10, 11, 1200s. And we're going to move a little bit to the West, as we usually do. We're going to talk a little bit today about some stuff going on here in Central Asia, some stuff going on in India, and stuff down here in Southeast Asia towards the end of the stream. Gupta, see you as well, but we are quite a ways past the Guptas. Quite a ways past, but that's cool. Is that racist? I don't know if that's racist. I think it's just a pun. It could be though. We'll just leave it at that, I guess. All right. So first off, what's going on in the region here? Well, where we last talked about India, there were a lot of things going on. There's a whole bunch of smaller kingdoms that are mostly fighting among themselves. There's been a little bit of unification going on up here in the north. But broadly speaking, India was pretty disparate. It was small kingdoms fighting with each other. There were about 10 of them around this time period, and they weren't necessarily as powerful as they had been in the past. One of the things that is becoming powerful, though, during this time period are some of these big Central Asian empires. And people like the Samanids, who were Persian Muslims, were making big headwinds and had even started moving a little bit towards perhaps extending themselves into India. There had been some fighting going on here, especially around this location right here, which is the Khyber Pass, which separates the Indus River Valley and the rest of India from Central Asia. And tonight that's going to get particularly noteworthy with a group that we're going to call, or that are referred to historically as the Ghaznavids. So, who were the Ghaznavids? Well, they're going to get their start with a guy named Mahmud of Ghazni. And originally, the family of Mahmud is going to be in league with the Samanid Empire. And they're going to slowly but surely start getting more power, and they're going to have cities that are going to sort of be given over into their leadership. This is the late 900s, if you are keeping up with the time period. And Mahmud's father is this guy named Sebuktigin. And there's a whole bunch of internal stuff that we're going to sort of just allow to be perhaps a future viewer request episode if anybody's super excited. That is going to successfully set up a dynasty whereby the rule of the territory gets passed to his son. And then what's important here is that the family is going to get recognized as the official rulers of Ghazna, which is a big city and region, by the Abbasids. And at the time, the Abbasids were still the caliphs. They were the rulers of theoretically all of Islam. They're based in Baghdad. And having the Abbasids give you the thumbs up is pretty important, because this is going to establish you as a legitimate ruler. Now, this is, by the time we get to Mahmud, our guy here, it's about 998. And Mahmud is going to be really interested in expanding his territory. And there's an opportunity for him to do so towards the north into Samanid territory, but that's going to potentially run afoul of the Abbasids, who had at least nominally recognized the Samanids as in control. So the angle that he's going to start looking at is this southerly role. What about India? What if we invaded this direction? And this is something that, again, had been sort of tried a little bit by this time, but it's not necessarily successful, because there were Indian kingdoms there that were quite large at times, or at least ones that were able to marshal quite a bit of manpower, or that were able to build coalitions large enough to hold off any Muslim advance. But our guy Mahmud is going to be very successful, and he's going to break into a region called Punjab, which is, if we look sort of like this area right in here, and is going to control then the pass that connects Central Asia to India, which is going to give him geographic access to this area, which means that he's going to continue moving in that direction. And by expanding into first Punjab and then larger into northern India, this is going to bring with him quite a bit of loot and quite a bit of prestige. What's up, Cave? Good to see you. Because this is territory that had never been really directly opened to Islam. And in fact, a lot of the native Indian kings were wary of the expansion of Islam. There had been quite a bit of trade along the coast here with places like Persia and like Arabia and like Africa. All of those areas had Islamized during this time period, and India was sort of wary about letting larger Muslim populations in. They had exposure to the area, obviously, through things like trade, but they weren't necessarily building mosques and setting up governments. But Mahmud is going to be the guy that does that, and it's going to give him a big feather in his cap. Speaking of his cap, here's a picture of Mahmud standing here on his fancy little dais, putting on a very fancy robe and wearing a crown. This is from a little bit later chronologically, but not too terribly later. But this is going to be, him. He's a king. Look at how powerful he is. He has expanded into the area where nobody else has, and the Abbasids are recognizing him as this big, powerful leader. So, it's the good stuff. Now, the government that he's going to set up is originally going to be sort of a small provisional one. This is not really going to completely turn northern India into a province. It's going to be a little bit of a smaller, kind of like a territorial outpost almost. The big invasions were going to be sort of raids in force, not necessarily designed to completely take territory, but as the raids succeed, it's going to be easier for him to start expanding, and not just expanding by territory, but also expanding converts. This is when we're first going to start seeing people that are from the subcontinent of India convert en masse to Islam. And this is partially to do with the fact that Islam did not really care very much for the native Hindu religions. Now, if you were in an area that was Christian or Jewish and you'd been conquered by an Islamic force, you were seen as a little bit of a special case because you had some of the truth. You were considered a person of the book. The book here referring to the sort of larger Judeo-Christian scripture base, Old Testament, New Testament. Of course, Islam would say that the Quran is sort of like the third of these books. But Hinduism was not viewed particularly very well by Islam, as it was not a religion of the book, and therefore was considered just as pagan as pagan could be. So there were different social aspects that would come along with being part of the Islamic Empire. If you were a person of the book, you could basically get away with paying a little bit of a special tax and then being a little bit more of a kind of like a second-class citizen. But none of the Hindus had access to that, and this is, of course, going to cause a lot of motivation, if you will, to convert. It's fairly significant to point out, though, that in a lot of these situations, the local people weren't necessarily being forced to convert. They were just being socially pressured into doing so, right? What's up, Maddie? Good to see you. How cross-culture are crowns as a symbol of leadership? Pretty cross-culture. Special headgear is a pretty universal sign of being important or special or more powerful, more influential, right? And this is not necessarily just political stuff, but you also see things, like religious stuff, right? You look at the big Pope hat, right? The various hats that Egyptian pharaohs would wear, or these are the same hats that Egyptian gods would wear, right? So you could see that this is a pretty big crossover thing. Spoiler alert. I'm not sure exactly what the spoiler alert was. What's up, though? I wonder if crowns came out of angel iconography. Probably not. I mean, we see a lot of that stuff way before we get... Well, I mean, I guess if you're talking about angels as in just like non-human spirits that exist outside of the world, maybe. But like if we're talking about like Judeo-Christian angels, no. I mean, we have crowns as far back as we can identify, like in civilizations. Like our first depictions of rulers all have special headgear. You go all the back to like Mesopotamia, that one of the guys that is sort of leading the way in religio/political symbolism is this guy named Naram Sin. He's one of the kings of ancient Mesopotamia from way, way, way back. One of the first empires that existed on the face of the earth, the Sumerians. And he depicted himself wearing a headdress of the gods. So even as far back as we have original like pictographical political iconography, we see headgear. But even if we go back beyond that, like we look at old burial stuff, adorning the head is a pretty common thing. Whether or not the political aspect of that is the same throughout if we look at this anthropologically, is a nomadic shaman's headdress going to represent the same symbol as a sedentary agriculture king? Probably not, but it's a designator, right? It might not be the exact same meaning, but it serves roughly the same function, if that makes any sense. Imagine if people use golden stilts instead. That'd be actually pretty cool, right? Like literally the king is towering over you or looking down on you. That would be awesome. And then you'd be judged on how well you could walk around on stilts. I would suspect that would be problematic though, because especially in the ancient world, it was really, really hard to build tall ceilings out of mud brick stuff, because the base of the walls would just collapse. So there was a bit of a limit as to how tall your room could be, unless you made all of it out of stone, which would be really rough, because that's the expensive stuff, right? I understand scepters as symbols of military leadership, but the crowns seem random. Tuna, I'll admit that I've never read deeply into specifically the origin of the crown itself, so I don't know if I can give you the best answer to that question. I would think that part of it is probably just visibility, right? You can see my forehead fairly easly. If I put something fancy on that, that's going to show you that I can command this level of wealth, or that I can afford to employ craftsmen that create stuff like this, or that maybe, and maybe it grew out of helmets. If you're in a super ancient period of time where metal is scarce and you only have 4 helmets, you're going to put the best helmet on your king, right? Because you don't want him to die. And maybe that evolves over time from special military headdress to special political headdress. But that's just me speculating. So, good night from Europe. Hey, Raveland, good to see you. Oh, so you mean the old gin stuff with the magic pine cones and stuff like that? It's possible, but I don't know if those. Okay, so especially the things with the wings that are Babylonian jinn or angels or spirits or whatever they call them, those are Kassite Babylonian, from probably the 1800s BC, and I'm pretty sure that we have evidence of crowns before that too. I mentioned Naram Sin, who was Sumerian, and he would have been 3200 BC. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that they would eclipse even the Babylonian headdress stuff. You can never cross a cattle grid. Archimedes would have needed a bigger bath. Well, he already had the water elevator that he made out of his big Archimedean screw, so he could have pumped it up to a higher level to shower you off with your giant stilts, right? Once overheard a carpenter interested in archaeology, an archaeologist presenting on Israeli archaeology, and he said one of the questions he posed for didn't know the answer. So basically, ceilings are taller if the bottom of nails are pounded up. when the ceilings are being built. The ceilings are lower and can hit people in the head. If they're higher, the builders wouldn't bother pounding them up. All right, you can tell ceilings are taller if the bottoms of nails are pounded up when the ceilings are being built. If they're higher, the builders wouldn't bother. I guess I'm just not understanding. I'm sorry, Maddie. I'm so bad at visualizing things. I usually need my wife to draw me a picture. This is on me. I'm sure everybody else is like, dang it, I get it. Anyway. No, don't apologize. It's my brain being weird. I'm not always a visual understander. If you showed me like someone doing it, I'd be like, hey, but like trying to turn the words in. It's just my stupid brain. It's all good. Anyway, Mahmud of Ghazni is invading, and he's starting to bring people into India. He's starting to make himself known, and one of the things that he does to make sure that he is able to hold this territory is he starts building really big forts, like this particular one. This is at a place called Lashkari, and it's a big old hilltop fortress that's built by our guy Mahmud in order to hold on to this territory that he's managed to take down in India. I think they used headbands before crowns, right? Yeah, I would suspect so. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm with you now. So who cares about nails sticking out if people aren't going to be up there? I gotcha. I gotcha. Okay. What's up, Greythart? Good to see you. We're looking at India. Well, I mean, this is at the ancient India. I don't think this current location is actually in India. But anyway, hope you're doing well, my friend. So we're expanding, we're conquering a lot, we're getting more powerful, we're getting a lot of people on our side. And one of the things that Mahmud gets access to when he starts taking over India is something that the ancient world really hasn't seen for a while in wide-scale use. And it's the return of our friend the war elephant. But Mahmud is going to get access to a whole bunch of elephants from India, and he's going to bring them back into Central Asia and begin to expand northward into territory that used to be Samanid territory but had since fallen into a little bit of disrepair. The Samanids, by the way, are going to pretty much collapse during this time period. So if we're looking at I've got a picture, sorry. Here's Mahmud sitting on a war elephant. Now, I do think it's funny that the elephant has little finger toes. But, it's obviously an elephant. This is from a later document from the 1300s. So this is about 100 or so years after Mahmud would have lived. But it's pretty cool stuff. Elephants with paws, indeed. But what we're looking at here is a big old chunk of territory that Mahmud manages to put together. And this is a bunch of land. Now, what's interesting, again, you can see here that some of this territory he's not necessarily directly conquering. These are areas that would have been basically under his sway, but not necessarily directly under his control. The areas where you were going to be doing raids and such, right? But also, again, here, after accessing territory over here in India, we're going to turn this into expansion in the Persian Plateau, as well as up here towards a body of water that basically doesn't exist anymore. This is the Aral Sea, which is now Oh, I should show you all that. I don't know if you all know about this or not. This is the same body of water today. This is the Aral Sea. One of the most dramatic losses of a body of water that's happened in our world that we've been alive during. This used to be in the top 10 largest bodies of water lake-wise in the world, and now it's this like really shallow, salty leftover thing. Just random. Nobody cares about that. It has nothing to do with the Ghaznavids, except for they used to control that area, and it used to be much more navigable. But anyway, so that's the Ghaznavids. Now, what are we looking at for them culturally speaking? So the Ghaznavids as a group were Turkish. Their leadership, so the family of Mahmud, and I'm sorry, I keep saying Mahmud. It's not Mahmud, it's Mahmud. Anyway, the ruling dynasty was Turkish, but it's going to be like a Turkish crust over a Persian core. The military is going to be pretty heavily Turkicized, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of fast movement, a lot of cavalry stuff, light armor, not necessarily heavy anything, not even heavy cavalry, not much heavy cavalry or heavy infantry. Very fast sort of strike and fade tactic stuff. A little bit more slow paced when you put elephants into the mix, but hey, it's an elephant, right? But if you look at their government is pretty much going to look like the old Persian government. And this is something that was done as a direct attempt at claiming legitimacy. So Mahmud's family is going to actually claim that they are descended from the old Sassanid Persians. So this is the people group that ruled the Persian area prior to Islamic expansion. And they're going to say that they, through time and stuff like that, are going to be related to them. And this is how they are going to claim this legitimacy. But this is going to also give them a good alibi almost for adopting so much Persian culture. This is why we have images of Mahmud and his family, whereas a lot of other Muslim rulers at the time would not have been so interested in creating images. We're going to see a lot of Persian sort of influence that starts moving around a little bit towards India. It's not going to stick as much as the later group that we're about to talk about. But the cultures that they're going to make are going to be really, really impressive. So you get this Turkish crust over a Persian core, and then you throw Islam into the mix, and you get a whole bunch of really cool stuff. You get some advances in architecture. You also became shallow and salty during your lifetime, alas. This is really cool here. It was a minaret, and it was much larger in the ancient world. But you can check out this really cool brickwork. Lumpy might enjoy this, being a Minecrafter. But you get really, really cool stuff. And up here towards the top, you actually get, and this is very poorly preserved, unfortunately. The area that this is located in is rather seismically active, and there have been quite a few earthquakes that have damaged this. It used to be much, much taller. It used to have another 2 or 3 levels on top of this. But up here, you actually get this really neat brickwork where they were writing in Arabic along the sides of the building here, of this minaret. Just absolutely cool stuff. I really, really dig this. This is in modern day Afghanistan. This was a minaret for one of the big mosques that was constructed. So it was originally religious in function outside of the mosque. And again, it used to be much taller. There are older pictures of this from the late 1800s and early 1900s with the next level up still intact. from this part. There's a circular piece on top of that, and then a smaller circular piece on top of that. So it used to be almost twice as tall as this right here, but unfortunate, lost to time. But pretty cool stuff. So, you started playing Minecraft a couple of weeks ago. There we go. So now you can go rebuild some minaret stuff, right? That is a lot of bricks. It's an impressive a lot of bricks. Now the Ghaznavids aren't going to rule forever. They're actually fairly short. If we look from when Mahmud was expanding, he was doing his stuff in the late 990s. And the Ghaznavids are really only going to rule until the late 1100s, so only about 200 years. And there are going to be a couple of things that end up causing them to fall. One of them is the rise of a group called the Seljuk Turks that are becoming very popular and powerful during this period of time over in this region in the west. The Seljuks are going to become a global superpower for a little while. Maybe they should use the stilts to repair it, correct? Right? See, now we're thinking outside the box. The Seljuks are going to begin to expand, and they're going to destabilize the Abbasid ruling family over here. That's going to have ripple effects that, expands over here into Persia and into India as well. But there's also an interesting group that starts off under the leadership of the Ghaznavids and ends up becoming part of their doom. And this is a group called the Ghurids. And the Ghurids come from a region called the Ghor, which is just spelled Ghor. Well, I guess I could put... but anyway, the Ghor. It's where we get the title for the night. This particular region is an interesting one. So if we look at our, topography, you can see this neat little pocket right around here. All right, so you see the Himalaya mountain range. It comes up, and then you've got this little circle. And this is very, very tall on the elevation scale, but it's got this little sort of secluded valley set right around in here. This little area is referred to historically as the Ghor, Ghor. Now, what's interesting is that this region had been notoriously difficult to control, and most people had sort of just left it alone because trying to project your power into this geographical region is incredibly difficult, and the people there are not particularly fond of outsiders. One does not simply walk into Ghor, right? Think that in 2,000 years, some history streamer is going to be referring to obscure nations and peoples, and will be referring to Americans. In 2,000 years, probably, yeah. America's had a decent go. I don't think we'll last 2,000 years. But I've got a little bit of a different perspective on things. Countries aren't eternal, right? Empires fall. It's what happens. Political alliances shift. Ideological developments happen or don't happen, and things change. I am very firmly convinced that modern boundaries are exactly that. They're just modern. They're not permanent. It's not like anybody's going to make them happen. If we look at, what's going on in the South China Sea, or if we look at what's going on in Ukraine or Georgia or Venezuela, right? Who's has claimed almost 2/3 of Guyana. The modern set of borders is still in motion. And we think that we are living in this world where things are sort of guaranteed to exist because we all want them to exist. But that's not the case. Things don't exist simply because you want them to. Things only exist if people make them exist. And that's an important distinction. Just hoping America lasts 20 more years. We've got another 20 years. Easy. We've probably got another 100 years. At least. It's not going to be fun or easy. The next 6 to 8 years globally are going to be rough across the board. And I've said that a bajillion times, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows what I'm talking about at this point. So, you got a nice new old map last week. 1840 map of Europe. Oh, that's cool. 1840s. Man, Germany must look like an uncompleted Lego set. All the little duchies and principalities, and it really does. I must acknowledge that perfectly subtle Boromir reference. You're very welcome, Grow Forest. Good to see you. Ottoman Empire going strong. Yeah, by 1840, they would still have most of the Balkans at that point. No, they would have lost some of the Balkans. They would still have Greece. Yeah, that's pretty cool though. They'd still have like Northern Africa. If I sat right here for 20 years, I probably wouldn't be in the same country. 20 years. Is Ireland going to reunify in 20 years? I don't know what kind of odds I would give for that. I would think that maybe is slightly more likely to happen than not, but I'm not going to give you like 2-to-1 odds or anything. I mean, I might give you like 1.25 to 1 odds. But I don't know. It's more. It is more difficult than just we want to be independent. As many people in Scotland would say. You can't just pack your bags up and leave the UK. Anyway, so the people living in the Ghor are kind of like the epitome of hill people. The ones that are scary, the ones that will kill you if you go up into the hills, the ones that don't like outsiders. They have their own particular way of life. They don't necessarily speak the same language as everybody else. They're not necessarily interested in the cultural advances that have happened outside of them. I'm not trying to say that they're backwards and weird, but I mean, they're very isolated up here in the Ghor. And what's really interesting around this period of time is that the Gurids especially would love to have some military backup, right? They like the idea of having, a larger military. And one of the things that they managed to do to sort of like tease the Ghor out of, tease the Gurids out of the Ghor is by bringing them into the military. Now, originally, this was done in a, I don't know, kind of like a mercenary gone bad thing, where they're initially brought in as mercenaries, but then they sort of end up almost as slaves. They lose a little bit of their independent abilities to operate, but by the early and mid 900s, they had converted to Islam. And what that ends up doing is creating a sort of this new, interesting drive of zealotry. Because anytime you see this sort of isolated, inward-looking, unique culture that gets exposed to this new religious ideology, and then they accept this new religious ideology, they are pre-programmed to sort of look at everybody else as outsiders, right? So just culturally speaking, the people of the Ghor were not going to look at all of the other Muslim people as like them. And what ends up happening is that they go like full in on like way conservative, very literal interpretation of Quran, pious zealotry Islam. And they even look at the Turkish leadership of the Ghaznavids and go, you guys are doing it wrong. You all are like way too lax. You all are like letting women walk around without headscarves on. You all are like drinking alcohol. You're not doing it the right way. And this mindset of we're actually doing it right and you're doing it wrong combines with this, you're taking advantage of us and putting us on the battlefield and having us die instead of you dying. And it creates a lot of tension between the Ghurids and the Ghaznavids. And this is going to turn into a situation where the Ghurids are going to pretty much get enough of it. And they're going to say, we're going to rebel against you. And this is where we get a guy named Muhammad of Ghor. And I can't show you a photo or a picture or a painting of him because his people did not make images of people. This is, again, a sort of a difference between the way that the Ghaznavids and the Ghurids would approach things, is that the Ghurids are, again, very, very strict with their interpretation of Islam, and these images of people are sort of anathema. So Muhammad is a very conservative leader. He's also a religious zealot, and he sort of saw himself as the physical, personal embodiment of jihad. And he's going to take that sort of zealot power or fuel, and he's going to turn it against the Ghaznavids, who were already a little bit reeling from the whole stuff going on with the Seljuks in the west. And Muhammad of Ghor is going to end up taking over all of their territory. I'm imagining future historians emanating from the city of Chicago by the year 2050. 90% of the North American continent had converted to neo-Ivanism. If Ivan ever started a religion, that would be fascinating. First off, I don't know if Ivan would start a religion. He might start a religious philosophy. I don't necessarily want to speak for Ivan personally, but I believe that I've heard him say that he's fairly a-religious in general, especially atheist, I believe. Ivan explicitly wants to start a religion. Interesting. What's up, Frank? Aloha, my friend. Good to see you. He doesn't get to choose if we start a religion about him. That's fair. Teaching rationality is the central tenet. Interesting. Moose, in 2050, Keith Richards will be in Chicago in concert, right? Grathar, our friend Ivan Neo, let me give him a shout out. I believe that's how he... yeah, that's him. Ivan is a neuroscientist that also does a lot of philosophical stuff. His streams are very conversational, but very, very smart. He's a deep thinker. He's definitely got it going on. And he's got like intellectual chops. I usually show up in his stream and look like an idiot. But if you're not following Ivan Neo, you should. He's a good streamer, and we have a good time in his chat. He usually streams on Sunday afternoons and Wednesday afternoons. Grethar, I don't know if that directly translates to afternoon in your time. It would probably be closer to like super late at night on Wednesday, but like dinner time on Sundays. He's a smart dude, though. I've got a lot of respect for Ivan. Anyway, so here's your Ghurid Empire. And what's notable here is that Muhammad is going to conquer a lot further into India, right? Whereas our Ghaznavids are going to stop right around in here. The Ghurids are going to continue all the way over here to the Bay of Bengal, which is is substantial, right? This is a big old chunk of people. If you look at the population centers that are being wrapped into the Ghurid Empire, these are really, really, really populated cities. Lahore, Delhi, these are huge, huge cities. But this is what happens, right? When you bring the zealotry out of the Ghor, it turns into an international powerhouse. Now, what's interesting here about the culture of the Ghurids is that they have this sort of hard core of Muslim tenets, but they're recognizing along the way that you can't necessarily enforce that same level of zealotry on your population. This doesn't mean that they don't expect everybody to be good Muslims, but they also are capable enough of administrators to understand that you can't really just like run away with stuff. So they're never going to fully abandon the ideology, but they are going to take nods on things from other cultures, especially when it comes to things like the way that they build stuff and the way that they dress. Now, I will point out that they do have a big issue with, especially the way that women dress. The women are going to be expected to dress much more moderately and modestly, but the men are going to be able to look a little bit more than just sort of your standard light colored khaki sort of dress. The Persian culture that had been the core of the earlier Ghaznavids is going to roll over into the Ghurids as a form of government and specifically as a form of speech. The Ghurids find out really quickly that a lot of people in this territory already spoke Persian. This is partially because of the Ghaznavids popularizing it, but also because it was a very popular trade language. So the Ghurids are going to adopt that Persian as their language of government. Now, not their language of religion, right? But their language of their government. And they're going to provocateur tip. I'm sorry, missing stuff. Pro tip, Ivan hates Bayesians. If you insult Bayes, he'll love you. Yeah, Ivan is a big fan of Bayesian logic and reasoning. I would caution against insulting Bayes. But you do see the Ghurids taking some of the cool stuff from the Ghaznavids and carrying it forward, even though they're not going to be as down with the whole less than conservative culture stuff. But here's a pretty cool minaret, built along the same sort of style, but this one sort of goes even further. This is a minaret. It's called the Minaret of Jam, just Jam. But we're looking at the same sort of crazy levels of brickwork here, taken to yet another level. So if you can see here, these patterns, these are actually Arabic words that are running along this pattern of this minaret built out of bricks. This is absolutely crazy levels of detail here. And this, again, goes all the way up, and you have these really great cut stone pieces that are laminated on this top level. But then it goes up another 2 levels. So it's just absolutely stunning. This particular minaret is unfortunately in a location that is not very safe. It's in Afghanistan today, and there have been, unfortunately, quite a few battles fought not too far from it. It's not able to be very well cared for that reason, but man, is this beautiful. This sort of stuff just blows my mind. The level of intricacy that it would take to write out all of this stuff in brick along a moving track of pattern and carry this all the way around in this helix form, and it's just crazy. It's a level of craftsmanship that blows my mind. So obviously here, even though the Ghurids are going to have a very strict approach to Islam, they're going to have beautiful things, right? This is somewhat of a common misconception with a lot of, especially ancient stuff. When we see really conservative cultures, there's a tendency in our mind to equate that with sort of a stark level of physical culture. Like they don't have objects of beauty, they don't have works of art, they don't necessarily have decoration. They sort of live like really sort of stripped down, what we might call Spartan with a small s sort of lives. But that's not necessarily the case in a lot of these situations. A lot of these people had incredibly high levels of skill. They just also happen to be very religiously conservative. A Bayesian is a person who, expecting a horse and catching a glimpse of a donkey, is confident that they have seen a mule. What's up, Foggage? How's it going, my friend? If the previous one was intricate, this is entirely something else. Yes, exactly, Growthor. So they took what the Ghaznavids had done and they went like one level up, or 2 levels up even from there. Are these the structures that have the built-in cooling system, like remove the hot air from our prayer rooms? So that's a tower, or it's actually a minaret. And you can go inside of it, but I don't think this was specifically designed to serve a function of like a large prayer room. But I know what you're talking about, Grow Forest. That sort of thing was being done in different areas across the world at this time. There were contemporaneously rooms that were built in places like Korea, where they understood the concept of hot air rising and cold air staying low, and they would build different types of windows in the building to allow for that to leave. Anyway, that kind of stuff is happening, right? We get the moving around of hot air stuff. What's up, Indiana Jones? Good to see you. Dun, 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 dun. That is the minaret of Jam. You are correct. So the Ghurids, they're pretty cool. Now, they don't last a really, really long time. If we look at Muhammad of Ghor, he's going to start doing his conquest in the 1170s, and he dies in 1206, and it's only about 9 years later that the Ghurids are going to pretty much collapse. Now, that's kind of crazy because that really only gives the Ghurids about 1100, or sorry, not 1100, about 110 or 120 years where they're really in charge. And that's not necessarily the longest span of time, historically speaking, but their impact is really big. And one of the things that's really, really big about the Ghurids especially is how much the influence of Persian culture and court are going to be introduced into India. Islam was established in India at this point. Persian was established as the language of government at this point. And one of the remnants of the Ghurid Empire that manages to maintain some level of control and then go on to expand is the Sultanate of Delhi, which is going to control India for hundreds of years. Now, we're not going to get into that tonight because that's for the next time that we come back around. But the Sultanate of Delhi is one of the coolest ancient Indian groups. They're very, very powerful for a very long period of time. But they keep a lot of the stuff that the Ghurids had introduced, especially the Persian influence as a government language. So Ghaznavids and Ghurids in northern India are both very important, very impressive. This is also going to serve as a foundational tie between northern India and Central Asia. Then this is a tie that had existed for a long time. We've talked probably dozens of times about the trade connection between Central Asia, India, and China. But that had somewhat decayed on land due to the rise of trade in the Indian Ocean. The ships moving along the coastline of the Indian Ocean were really the new big Silk Road that was pushing a lot of the trade during this time period. But the land aspect of that gets reintroduced during this period of time where you have these two different political entities that exist both in Central Asia and in India. And that's going to be an important ideological tie that puts these people back into intellectual contact. And it's not like this, again, had ever been really shut off, but a refreshing of the connection is an important step here. What's up, Noger? How's it going, man? Yeah, I do hope you're feeling better. Last time we chatted, I think you said that you were fighting off a cold. So I hope that has, unfortunately, about the same. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That sucks. All right, so those are two big empires that are both going to be up in the north. But let's move down to the south part of India and talk about a group called the Chola. Put a little bit of a... There we go. Now, zoom out of the Ghor, and we'll come down here to the south. So, the Chola was an empire that is made up of several groups of people that are called Tamils. So the Tamils were an ethnic group in southern, well, I guess they still are because they're still there, in southern India and northern part of Sri Lanka. And they had been around for a long time. And, you know, they had been like literally at this point thousands of years. And they had always been sort of on the periphery of the larger Indian groups. Like someone mentioned the Guptas earlier. The Gupta Empire was big and powerful and controlled a big old chunk of India, but not the Tamils. Other big groups that were dominant in India would very frequently not get all the way down into the south. Now, part of this is because of the imposing nature of India geographically. This big chunk of territory right here is the Deccan Plateau, and it's very, very, very arduous to try to move from the northern part of India down to the southern part of India. And along the coastline here, there's easier travel, but there are also lots of people here that don't really like people moving through. For a long period of time in Indian history, there was a group that sat right about here that were called the Kalinga, and they were super anti-outsiders. They pretty much got wiped out by this guy named Ashoka, and he got very sad and converted to Buddhism. So I know that this particular word is used a lot now for Latino people, but like this guy, we're not to the point of talking about him yet. Well, I mean, I guess we can. This is Raja of the Chola Empire. He's one of the more powerful emperors of the Chola, and he doesn't look like a stereotypical person that might be on Grand Theft Auto, right? He's just a Tamil from the southern part of India that has a really cool hat and a lot of power. So, there you go. Anyway, the Tamils were going to end up moving towards a more centralized group. So there had been different kingdoms that were smaller Tamil kingdoms, like Pandyas and different smaller groups like that. But they're going to start moving towards unification, mostly due to outside pressure from other Indian kingdoms. And by the time we get to about 850 or so, the Tamils were going to be a pretty powerful group in their own right, and they're going to start expanding and taking out some of these other old Indian powers, like the Pallava dynasty, which we've talked about multiple times. They were a group that held a pretty big chunk of land right around in here. So the Tamils, who had normally been right around in the southernmost tip, are going to get a big chunk of land right here. That's going to put them into contact with other groups, especially the Chalukya, who are over here, who don't really care for them very much, and they have to fight quite a bit. But by the time we get to the guy that I just showed you, Raja Chola, he's in control about 980. The Tamils had been unified. Tamil unification completely happens in 970s. By the time we get to Raja Raja, who's taking over in 985, he's going to be the person that sort of finally puts the stamp of unification. There were some Tamil rebellions where some of the other ruling families that had previously been in charge of some of these disparate Tamil groups are going to try to rebel against him. He's going to have to put them down very, very hard as is sort of a bloody period of time that's not really remembered super well by some of the groups. But Raja Raja is the emperor, so he gets to kind of do whatever he wants to. He's also going to invade Sri Lanka in 993, and he's going to take a pretty big portion of the island of Sri Lanka under his control. We're just having way too much fun with the Chola, aren't we? That's okay. We can have fun with it. But by the time we get to about 1,000, he's expanded even further up the territory into what would have been Kalinga territory and taken all of this stuff. So what we end up with is this. Now, this is a little bit fast forwarding, but the Chola are going to end up taking over a big old chunk of southern India. And beyond that, they're going to start having a lot of influence over all of these other areas, all the way down into places like Sri Lanka, all the way down into places over here like what is modern-day Thailand. And this is going to be done through naval expeditions. Over here in the Maldives Islands, Raja Raja is going to have a big ol' honkin' navy. And he's going to start setting out and doing naval raids, especially towards these big cities. Now, over here in Southeast Asia, you can see right here, we have our Srivijaya Empire that already exists. Of course, we've got Chinla, who are the Khmer, the Champa. We've got our earliest attempts at Burmese unification. We've already talked about some of those places, the Bagan. Anyway. But they're not going to be able to stand up to the Chola Navy. And this is going to put all of these port cities basically in their sphere of influence. So when the Chola ships show up, you're going to do whatever they tell you to do. And this is going to put the Tamils in a leadership position that they had never really experienced before. This is something that is the sort of apex of their power. And this lasts for quite some time. So he's doing most of this expansion in the late 900s and early 1000s. The imperial period of the Chola is going to last all the way up until almost 1300. Now, what's interesting here is that it's sort of a benevolent empire where I have beaten you up and I'm going to make you do what I tell you to do, but this is going to make you a ton of money. And I mentioned previously the really, really expansive amounts of money that were moving around the Indian Ocean. And this area, especially down here in Southeast Asia, had become just loaded with trade cities and port cities and trade routes. And because of the size of their navy, the Chola are basically going to dominate this entire chunk, the Bay of Bengal of the Indian Ocean. And you don't get to move through their waters without paying their dues. And they're just going to rake in money by the boatload. No pun intended here. They just get massively, massively wealthy. And this is going to start drawing attention of other people groups inside of India. And the expansion of the Chola and their imperial period, again, this 350-ish year period of time where they're dominating the coastlines here, is going to show exactly how much value is in this Southeast Asian trade route stuff. And when the Sultanate of Delhi begins to expand, one of the things that they're going to look at is dominating that trade. And this is one of the reasons why the Sultanate of Delhi becomes probably the richest country that's ever existed on the face of the earth. They were fabulously wealthy. By the time we get to the 1400s, they have almost half of the global economy moving through their territory. It's a crazy level of wealth in the Sultanate of Delhi. But that's made possible because of the fact that the Chola, under the leadership of the Tamils, were able to do that to begin with. But when you get all of this money, what do you do with it? You know, you've got this just giant piles and piles and piles of money. What do you do with it? Well, you build really cool stuff. Like this. This is Brodishwara. This is a humongous temple that is just absolutely amazing. And here's a picture of it, just, you know, as it is. But what's really cool about this is that we can also go check this out on Google Earth, and we can walk around it a little bit. If I could spell it. There we go. All right, so let's go over here to Google Earth full screen. And no, what are we doing? Boop. And we'll go walk around. Let's start right about here. So this whole temple complex is pretty big and very impressive and has all sorts of really cool sculptures and friezes and stuff like that. But obviously, the really cool thing to look at here is this massive central tower that's just stacks on stacks on stacks of these really cool statues and decorations. And let's see if we can zip a little bit further ahead. Can you just take me like right here? What if I did this? Oh, I guess we can go to right there. All right, cool. Actually, I think my picture was a little bit better. But anyway, you build cool stuff like this. Big honkin' temples, these gigantic complexes that have absolutely dwarfed the scale or make you feel like super tiny. There's a better picture. You see a lot of the internal statuary stuff. Like all of these niches would have had statues in them. This nice, cool little courtyard here. All sorts of big stupa things that are going to be topped with these really cool animal statues. There's a great view of it. Very cool. That is universal cool stuff, man. I really like this. But again, this is what happens when you have just giant stacks of money. You can build cool things like this. So there you go. Now, the Chola are not going to be able to live forever. Unfortunately, one of the things that's going to be their downfall is one of the things that led them to being powerful in the first place. They had made peace with the group over here that were the Chalukya. That's going to dissolve, and then they're going to have this big, angry neighbor. The amount of money is going to lead to a little bit of leadership overspending, perhaps a little bit frivolous with the money as leadership. This is also going to lead to these really, really enormous families where you have lots and lots and lots of kids, and there's enough money to go around so that everybody can bribe everybody. And as you probably expect, what this is going to end up doing is causing lots of internal strife, especially by the time you get to the early 1200s. The internal politics of the Chola had begun to splinter pretty badly. You start getting lots of assassinations. You start getting these situations where a king might have 7 or 8 different heirs that are all legitimate. And the internal politics issues are going to cause a little bit of external blindness. This is one of the reasons why the Eastern Chalukya, when they are going to go back on their deal, are going to be so devastating with their invasion, is because the Chola weren't really expecting that, because they were sort of looking inside. Government corruption and nepotism must be the first time ever, right, Noger? It's kind of crazy, but that's what happens. And when you have these big internal issues with all this money, it's going to start causing trouble. And when they have to turn their attention to fighting on land, that is going to take man away from the boats, which is going to cause a slow but steady breakdown of their trade routes. By the time that we get to the 1200s, a lot of these other Southeast Asian countries had expanded quite lucratively of their own accord, under direction of the Chola, and were expressing a little bit more of a independent streak, and were able to gain more independence, get out from under the yoke of the Chola Empire. So it sort of falls apart by degrees, but it's what ends up happening when you have these big, humongous networks of trade that are really only tied together by ships. Sea travel is faster than land travel, but still it's pretty hard to keep a piecemeal empire like this held together very easily. So now, those are the three big empires: the Ghaznavids, the Ghurids, and the Chola. But what are we really looking at here? Sort of the cherry on the sundae for India during these 3 centuries. What's the point of this? Well, the point of this is that India as a whole recognizes that if they act together, they can be more powerful. And they're going to sort of understand this larger centralized government means there's profit for a lot of people. And a lot of the powerful people that were in India understand that to get to sort of that epic level, you're going to have to take over your neighbors. And this period of India being small countries that are all sort of fighting over each other, they're fighting these tiny little battles between each other for the control of one city or 2 cities. That period of time is pretty much going to go away. For the next, what we might say, 800 years, India is going to move towards a more unified approach. The Sultanate of Delhi is going to conquer most of the continent and into other areas. They're going to hold on until the British show up, and the Europeans are going to take that away from them. And then, of course, we get the modern state of India today. But one of the things that ties this material into what we're looking at in India today is, if you look at what's going on in Indian politics today, I don't know how many people keep up with Indian politics. I do, because I read too much. The government of India right now is having a lot of trouble. It's the world's largest democracy, but it's not doing very well right now. They have expelled 140 members of their parliament right now. There are massive claims of corruption against the ruling party right now. There is a lot of ethnic and religious tension going on in the country right now. And a lot of that has to do with this different mix of people that made India up. So during this time period, what's happening when you have these empires that are connecting India to outside territories is that they're bringing in different groups of people. They're bringing in different languages. They're bringing in different cultures. They're bringing in different ideology. At this point, Islam is never going away from India. Islam is still in India today, and is one of the biggest issues in India today. The current ruling party is very openly Hindu nationalist, and they do not care very much for a lot of the Muslim people that are still left in India. Those people trace their heritage all the way back to this period of time in India. And it's not like this is something that happened, yesterday, but this is still something that has effects on today, right? I always like to try to draw those lines between the past and modern day to remind everybody that just the stuff happening today is enough to think about, but where did it come from? Could this be explained by something that happened, 800 years ago? And sometimes it can, right? This is why learning about history is important. If somebody had said, hey, Why do the modern Hindu government people not get along with the Muslim government people? I could probably start talking about the Ghaznavids and the Ghurids and how the use of Islam was brought to India against their will, and then when people converted to Islam, they were treated better than the people that were native Hindu. So this created a level of discomfort between the populations, and that carried on for the next 800 years. Right? It's still the same world that we live in, even though it's been a long time ago. So, why is there a problem with Sri Lanka? Why does the government of Sri Lanka not like the Tamils? A lot of the same reasons go back to the expansion of the Chola Empire, right? Outsiders coming in and making us do things that we don't want to do. So it's an interesting time period, and I really like this period of time in Indian history. But again, I'm sort of weird, and I just like all time periods of history, and I'm a giant history nerd, so that's kind of what I do. But that is all that I wanted to say tonight. But as always, if there are other questions about this material, or if you are interested in spending any channel points or anything like that, now is a good time to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to be looking at what's going on and seeing if we can go raid somebody. So, what's going on in your world? What do you want to talk about? I've noticed that just in general, and this is just me talking because I don't like having dead space, India doesn't get a lot of attention. Like when I do streams about the history of India, the attendance is always lower. Tuna asks what's in the news. Tuna, do you have something specific about what's in the news that you'd want me to talk about? And then we have an opinion hat about Colorado. Interesting. I'll wait for Tuna. I can choose. What can we talk about? I guess the big thing that we can talk about in the news right now that's sort of still developing is the big shooting in Czechia. So in what would be very early this morning at modern time, like during last night, but early this morning in Czechia, there was a shooting at a university in Prague that has the guy shot 25 or 26 people, and at this point about 15 of them, I think, or 14 or 15 have died. But there's kind of an ongoing investigation as to like what's actually going on. But the biggest issue is that in the event as it was going on, the person that was doing the shooting also died. So it's kind of like doing the investigation thing now, trying to figure out who this person was, what they, might have been doing, if there was any sort of explanation for why. But they don't even know at this point, as far as I know, whether or not he killed himself or if he was shot by authorities. So that's pretty stuff. Streams on India, lower attendance. I wonder if you could raid into Indian streamers to recruit, engage an interested audience. That's a fair question, Fogage. I don't know. I don't know if there are Indian streamers that I could raid right now. I guess I could browse to see if there was anybody under the tag Indian. And there are no people streaming right now under the tag Indian, which is kind of crazy. Oh, wait, let me go to just chatting and then tag India. Um, I don't know. Here's a person. Let me see. It's a small stream, but we might go raid them. But let me put on the opinion hat because we got the opinion hat summoned. Da, 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 da. What's my opinion about Trump getting kicked off the ballot in Colorado? My opinion. I don't think it's going to matter. I know that a lot of people are getting very excited about it because a lot of people are like, holy crap, look, he got kicked off the ballot in Colorado. I don't think it's going to matter. And let me tell you why I don't think it's going to matter. First off, he wasn't going to win Colorado anyway. He didn't win Colorado last time, and he didn't win Colorado in 2016 when he actually won the presidency. So I don't think it's going to matter. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, well, what about the precedent? What about the precedent that it set? Are other states now going to sue for the same reason and then get him kicked off of the ballot in their state? And some states are trying to do that. I think Rhode Island is trying to get him kicked off the ballot there. I don't think it's going to matter. I think it's going to end up at the Supreme Court, and I think the Supreme Court is going to rule that states can't kick people off the ballot based on the 14th Amendment. I think that they're going to say that the 14th Amendment and the clause of insurrection that is into the 14th Amendment is going to be only applicable on a federal level. And I don't think that states are going to be able to independently ascertain whether or not somebody caused an insurrection or participated in an insurrection. I don't think it's going to stick, and I don't think ultimately it's going to matter. And I know that's probably not what a lot of people wanted to hear, but this is my opinion, and I'm being a pragmatist. I don't think it's going to matter. I think that it's going to embolden a lot of the people that were potentially going to sit out. People that weren't necessarily super pro-Trump, that were maybe moderate Republicans that weren't just going to vote, but now the issue is, are we going to allow a candidate chosen by a Republican National Convention to be denied access to the ballot? And that's a bigger issue. And I think this is going to ultimately cause more people to vote for Trump. And I don't think that Biden can afford that. So based on my opinion, I still think Trump's getting elected next year again. And I don't think that anything that's happening right now is going to prevent that. I don't foresee anything keeping him from being president again next time. So there you go. Shooter may have been a philosophy student. Oh, Nova, are you being serious or you're just being haha? Maybe I could search by city. Oh, that's interesting. They said last night he was shot as soon as an officer had a clear shot. That came across the BBC. Okay, thank you, Moose. I appreciate that. I appreciate you clarifying that for me. The Supreme Court in Michigan ruled that he could not be kicked off the ballot. I think that it was based on the fact that he hadn't been convicted. And that's fair too, Moose. Again, ultimately, I think this is going to come down to an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. And I think that the Supreme Court is not going to want to be... So the Supreme Court is obviously political, right? Obviously political. Anybody that says the Supreme Court isn't political has not paid attention to the Supreme Court since its inception. I don't think that the people on the Supreme Court right now are going to want to be remembered as the ones who told Trump he couldn't run. And I think that is going to very heavily play into what they do when they get these challenges, because inevitably these challenges are going to show up, right? This is going to end up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to decide on all of this stuff. And I don't think that it's going to turn out the way that a lot of people want it to. And I think that me saying that is actually a positive thing for the moment, because the only thing that I could hypothesize as a way to keep him from getting elected again is for people that don't want him to be elected to get off of their collective ass and do something about it. The biggest thing that's going to reelect him is apathetic, lazy buttholes that are going to complain about it and do nothing to stop it, which is how most bad people get elected in the first place. So if you don't want Trump, go register people to vote. And on the day that it's set up to vote for you, go pick people up and take them to voting places. and help them make wise decisions and do something about it. Don't just gripe and moan on the internet about stuff, right? His second term will be absolutely nutters. It absolutely will be. Martin Shkreli, the farmer bro, is getting into politics. Holy crap. Holy crap. Sure he is. The young man who was a student of the Faculty of Philosophy then headed towards... I got you. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. He was a history student. He focused on the history of Poland. Interesting. Sarajevo Times. Okay, cool. Thank you, Nugger. I will be honest and say that I have not read the news recently. In your defense, you're Canadian. Doesn't mean that you have no influence over people. If you don't want to see him back, there are things that you could do. And I'm not trying to say, like, just register to vote in America. Not what I'm saying, obviously, right? Let's see if anybody's tagged Mumbai. No. Let's see if anybody's tagged India. No. Boy, I'll tell you, I'm browsing the current Just Chatting live channels, and 4 out of the top 4 top channels right now in Just Chatting are women who have very low cut tops on that are so low designed to make it look as if they're topless. So there we go. Interesting. I would not have expected that in Just Chatting. Okay, I don't think we're going to find Indian streamers. So, alas. We can go look to see who else is streaming. Which of the 4 are we going to raid into? I think we're going to go to try to find somebody else in the Knowledge Fellowship. So last stream on Tuesday, we raided into a new friend, Astro Canuck, who I knew about as a streamer, but I had never raided into before. So he's a fellow member of the Knowledge Fellowship, which I am a member of. And we can see who's around, and we can go maybe streams or go raid somebody that's in the Knowledge Fellowship, streaming somewhere else. Who else is streaming? Don't really want to raid anybody doing AI stuff. I don't think any of these people are still going to be streaming because that was from 6 hours ago. All right. Who am I following that's currently streaming? Nope, that's editing stream info. Who's around? Who is streaming? Who's Mr. Horologist? Do I know this person? Oh, let me catch. Oh, good gracious. We've had a lot of chat. Do I think that with the passing of time, people would learn to be kinder and wiser? But no, you're not bitter about young people. I'm surprised at how they're cut through. Well, why am I not wearing a low cut top? Nobody wants to see this. It's not attractive at all. Nobody wants to see that. He's a clock guy. All right. Do I know this person? Let's see if the clock guy is on. Balancing stat universal G. I don't know what this is. Okay, sure, why not? we're going to go raid a clock guy. Don't sell myself short. I'm pretty tall, but I'm very aware of the pastiness that is this. So I'll spare everybody that. But we're gonna go raid Mr. Orologist, who is a clockmaker, wibbly wobbly time wimey stuff, right? So we're gonna go see him. I don't know what we're walking into, but that's okay. Let me make sure that I say thanks to everybody. As a reminder, I have a Patreon. You can do that thing if you want to. I also have a list of books if you want to donate. Please don't feel like you need to do any of this stuff. In fact, don't. But also thank you to everybody that does. So there's that. And we will be around maybe this weekend, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. I've got a lot of work to do tomorrow. Before I can have any kind of fun. So there's that. Yell adventure when we get to Mr. Orologist's room and share emotes if you got them. But until next time, everybody, take it easily and have a good one.